I get these goddamn text messages and things. Another level. Well, no, I've gone right to YouTube. I'm gone right to YouTube. Can you get up and look at this?
Sure that it's live on Facebook.
Can you give me the YouTube link for anybody who wants to check it out that way?
Okay, we're live on YouTube.
Check Facebook. Here you go, Victoria. How do you want? I'll put it in the chat box, huh?
Yeah, in the chat. Yeah.
Should I put it for everyone, or just to you?
You can put it for everyone. So there's people waiting to be admitted.
Yeah, I'll admit them now.
Are we live on Facebook?
Yes, we are.
Oh boy.
Hello, everybody.
Well, there we are.
There we are.
Okay. Oh, Babette, there you are in Amsterdam. Hi, Marriott in Maryland.
Hi.
Ron is in Upper Peninsula, Michigan. Hey, by the way, this is our 12th show, and I think that's quite remarkable and exciting. So welcome, Victoria Vesna. Yeah, hi, Victoria. And if not everyone here knows Victoria, this is a great opportunity to get in touch with her and to resonate with her work. This is like the tuning fork, right? So resonating is part of the practice for this community that gathers every Tuesday. And now it's our 12th show. So it's quite a kind of a milestone today, Victoria. Thank you for joining us on the 12th show, and welcome everyone and their energy, and celebrating our synergy and the power of being together and staying together.
It's the 11th.
It's the 11th show?
Yeah.
Oh, I was ahead of my time. It's only the 11th show, which is even more auspicious. And don't you love to be wrong? Isn't it? It's always an opportunity to learn more. So anyway, here we are, and thank you everyone for being here. Some people occasionally tune in without their video camera, and I think it's kind of interesting that it's kind of like audio wallpaper, that the tuning fork is in the background as as audio wallpaper. Don't you think so, Emily? And by the way, Emily Harris is over here in the same room as I, just off to the side here. She's to my left. Yeah. And that's her mom, Sally Harris. Sally Harris often changes positions during these during the week. She finds another position in the house. Okay, thank you everyone. This is really great. Victoria, before we start, into more molecular subatomic details, I just was curious how you responded to the idea of our references to you as a media dervish, an identity blaster, and a nano art mama. With all respect, with all respect. I'm just curious how these sort of terms, these terms that we're loosely accumulating for the scholarship.
I like it. Flattered. I'm definitely flattered. I like the multiplicity of this, and yeah, let's see if the audience agrees with those labelings you put on me.
Yeah, we're passing around a survey at the end of the program.
Okay.
Everyone required
And a
with
test.
prohibition of future participation if non-compliant. We have a what do you call it? They stand at the door, you know, the bouncer.
Uh-huh.
We have a bouncer at our door because everyone has to register, you see. So registering for Zoom is like, you know, having a bouncer there to keep out the sort of spontaneous visitors, shall we say.
Yeah, you don't want to get Zoom bombed.
Well, you're never sure.
You're never sure.
You're never sure. That could be another program, inviting Zoom bombers. But we know that you're kind of an identity bomber. So anyway, whatever that means. But so I'm glad that we got through the first sort of question, which has to do with our scholarship and your comfort zone. But anyway, can I go on a little bit?
Sure, keep going.
Because I'm very curious. When I was a young artist in the 60s, at the end of the 60s, certain things got me very, very excited. And I was wondering, as a young person or as an artist, when you were younger, was there anything aesthetic that you discovered that was particularly exciting or compelling for you? Like, was there something that really, like, you know, exhilarated or inspired you or provoked you or evoked something in you? What was that, if any?
You know, actually, when I was talking to you the other day on the phone, I saw there were so many crossover paths, and my kind of brain waves going into expression really started in New York. And I have a couple of slides that I'll share with the audience because they,
Right.
even if you know me, you probably don't know this about me. So
I think I met you at Rafiq.
Exactly. So we're just
in the back room. The back room at Rafiq.
Yeah, no. So I worked in Rafiq for many years, but I think what you may not know is that I actually started my elementary school in Jakarta, in Indonesia, and then we went. My parents were from ex-Yugoslavia, so my father was a diplomat from Tito's Yugoslavia, which of course doesn't exist anymore. And he taught us children that we're Yugoslavian. So when Yugoslavia broke up, you had to determine yourself. And that was close to impossible because none of us are just this or just that, for me anyway. And I kept thinking,
what did you have to do, Victoria?
You have to, when Yugoslavia broke up into 6 or 7 countries, you have to determine if you're a Serb, a Croat, a Slovene, where, you know, so you become a citizen of a different country, basically. So if you imagine America breaking up, you have to determine, I'm from California, or, you know, and if you moved around a lot, it's very difficult to do.
Is
or
that
if you,
illegal? Is that a legal thing, a legal mechanism?
Oh yeah, that's basically how it is. So, so cut to, this is the high school I went to, in art and design, and I wanted to be a fashion designer, but I got very sick at one point, and I realized that the reason I got sick is because when I was doing these very fine drawings, I kept putting the brush in my mouth, and eventually that toxicity got me a tumor on my bladder. And I remember being on top of a roof in an empty pool, just going, let me live. And if I live, I'm going to stop doing fashion. I'm going to do art. so I lived. And we went to Belgrade and I studied fine art there. But this is the event that you asked me about. So,
Victoria, can we just take a, you know, this is what is it called? A disruption. Disruption.
Yes, I'm
1.
all into disruptions. It doesn't.
I know
upset
you
me
are.
at all.
These are the
So
master
I'll go
of
back here.
disruption.
Okay.
But yeah, so okay, so you want to leave fashion and go into art.
Yeah.
Why art? What was so compelling about that? That it was a life and death matter.
Because it felt like something that had no rules and could be bigger. And because I was in a high school that was in New York City in the 70s dealing with the actual fashion industry, it was very clear to me that that's industry, that's something that requires a certain behavior, a certain kind of materialistic way of being. And I was shocked out of that. I was shocked, and I just thought, well, maybe if I paint, and it was romantic at that point, mind you, but I really felt like I didn't want to be bound by industry or by materialism very early. It was like I was 13, I think, 14.
Now, Victoria, I look at the photograph of this taxi. Looks to me like 73, 74, the
I
taxi.
graduated, you're very good. I graduated 76.
Okay. So
Very
forgive my,
early. I was 16.
yeah. Now, the
but-
thing about illness, Victoria, and Monet Clark is here. She can attest to this, as I'm sure some of us can as well, that, Babette, people that I know personally who've been through a trauma or an illness, that it seems as though that sort of process almost filters out naturally extraneous kinds of less important elements in our lives. And suddenly the priorities seem to, emerge. The priorities, for example, we may discover also during the pandemic that we've had this sort of naturally purifying experience where our priorities become super sharp. So although you referred to your choice of moving into the art world, into art making as a romantic one, but there's also some perhaps implicit process going on in the unconscious. And I wonder what your ideas are about that. And maybe that's preempting what you were going to say, but just a question.
No, it wasn't preempting. Looking back, I just feel like there's some kind of mechanism that was driving me that wasn't conscious at all. And I'm sure a lot of it still is going on, right? So for sure, there's a lot of unconscious, but there's certain events too that happen that just shift your world like overnight. And sometimes you go along this path just thinking you're going in one direction, but then you meet somebody on that path that kind of shifts you completely. And I had that kind of meeting when I had a job, very kind of low level job, something in Barnes and Noble, one of those stores in the back. And I was stacking books, right? And this was before Rafik and everything. And as I was stacking books, they also gave us books to rip off the cover. So it was just like a horrible thing for me because they didn't want to sell them, but they would give them away, but they wanted the cover off. And one of those books was Black Rain about Hiroshima. And so I took a box of those books, took it to St. Mark's Place, laid it down, and big sign, free, right? And I have no idea what was motivating me, but I just didn't want them to be thrown out. And this Japanese man came up and said, "Why are you giving away these books?" And I said, "Well, I told him the story." And that one thing led to another. It turns out his name was Shin Higuchi. He was a painter from Japan and a ninja, a real ninja, against nuclear war and nuclear destruction. And he started being my mentor. So that what led me to get those books, put them on the pavement of St. Mark's Place is the question, right? Because that moment is what led me to sequence of events. I mean, really, it started making me learn about, beyond that book about the importance of being active in my work and as an expression, and he really felt strongly about this. So these kind of encounters, I'm incredibly in awe about when I look back, and grateful for.
Oh, Victoria, some of us have gotten used to the idea of the word synchronicity.
Yes.
And, you know, we can call this by different sort of names and terms, but it seems as though that the intuitive process kind of undermines the concept of synchronicity, because if there's intuition and interconnectivity, if we're conscious of it, we can sort of, you know, cultivate it, work with it, refine the intuition, so that those kinds of surprises or mysteries become a little more familiar. And so now you put up this band picture. You're like in a punk band at Max's Kansas City.
Well, no, this actually was another one of those events. I was 14 and a girlfriend of mine dragged me into Max's Kansas City, and I saw the New York Dolls, and it was as if my whole brain exploded. I mean, I just thought, oh my God, this is what's going on. I really felt like I was thrown into some kind of expression that I had to be part of, like that I just wanted to just be part of that, and that to have this band like literally in front of me was incredible, because I would, you know, I was collecting records and going to these large concerts and, you know, the Rolling Stones, but to suddenly see something that was so interactive with the audience was so amazing to me. So that was one of those events that you're talking about, like something that sparks you into thinking, wow,
Right.
I want to move in this direction.
Yeah. You know, for me, it was like words, like letters, text on pictures. You know, like Jim Dine or, you know, Larry Rivers. You know, these kinds of words and pictures mixed up together. That got me so excited, like fucking strong stuff. And I'm wondering if there's anything in your life now that sort of has the same kind of exhilaration or excitement. That was kind of part two of that question.
Yes, actually, having moments with my students gives me that kind of sense. To talk to students who are moved into these directions just is really important to me right now.
Coming back to the group and to the music, your contact with a medium that integrated or created some interaction between the performer and the audience. That seems to have gone into some, you know, rather profound place in your psyche and your palate. Oh, hi, Kathy Brew.
Hi, Kathy Brew. So let me then jump. Well, actually, let's see. Let me jump to where that started.
Before you jump,
okay.
I want to just ask everyone and take a little pause. Sometimes we do a conceptual art performance or something in the, you know, like a kind of commercial interruption, which is a kind of, it's a sublime form of hyperbole. It's a sublime hyperbole. But point out to us behind your left shoulder the sign that we can mostly read, I think. Maybe you can just, that's kind of maybe why we're outside. But there you go. There's something. What?
So
Tell us about that, Victoria.
Warren Needich asked me to submit something to show that would be outside because people can't go to galleries.
Warren
And
Needich.
Needich, sorry. And
Can I just say something about that?
sure, of course.
I don't mean to competitively be narcissistic here, but Warren Needich and I went to high school together.
There.
We had the same mentor in high school who sort of, launched us into these kinds of directions when we were watching movies and seeing art that we understood could change society in some subtle or fundamental way, that art had the power to do that. So I interrupted your narrative, but there's a parallel narrative there. And please come back to your story with
No,
the.
I love interruptions, and I actually invite the group here to feel free to interrupt.
Thank you.
The dynamic is good. So sitting with my partner, Jim Jevsky, who is listening, we started talking about, this was in April, and the show was going to be in May. So we were thinking, well, how many people will have passed by then? And then I don't know where it came to me, but I said, so in distance, we're in California, in distance, if you travel, like how many bodies would that be shoulder to shoulder? It's a very grim thought, but this is the numbers. So for 1 mile, you have 2,640 bodies. And now we're here at this stage, and it's just horrendous to think about that. We're renting a place in Santa Barbara. From Santa Barbara to LA is about 90 miles. If I'm driving from Santa Barbara to an LA, it's shoulder to shoulder bodies the entire time. That's how many people have passed away. So I wanted to have this kind of imagery for people, and I posted, I actually have a picture. I put up these signs in 3 locations. He was asking for one, but I thought, no, it really should be in different kind of cross important locations.
Okay, so
And what was
just for the
really weird is
audience
yeah.
who don't know, people who don't know, this was a project that Warren had cooked up with his partner in Long Island when they were living as hermits in the lockdown, Long Island, New York, over here, east of here, called Drive by Art. Is that right, Victoria?
That's right.
Drive by Art?
That's right.
So during
Yeah.
the pandemic, the idea was that people could safely see art from their car windows, which is such an American thing. America, get in your car.
That's right.
Go out and see some art, drive by art. So your drive by art was this tribute.
Well, it was exactly, and I placed it in 3 important locations. And what was really weird, I can even show you, is that when I was putting them up, nobody noticed, said anything, cared. I even had police cars pass by me. I was worried if, there's going to be a problem, but no such thing. So I'll just show you briefly the images.
You're telling us we can put up signs anywhere?
It was the most bizarre thing. Like people just, nobody cared. So do you see the sign?
Wow.
So there's one. Another one.
Well, it's not a matter for the police. It's a matter of the highway department.
Yeah, this one, anybody, nobody asked me anything. This one was right by the National Guard with all the homeless people. You can see the tents.
Right, I remember that image. I remember that.
And this one was at the beach, people running with no masks, so for us.
Hi, Liz Flynn.
Hi.
Victoria, what kind of, ultimately, what was the sort of result of that experience you had? What kind of direct or indirect feedback did you have from that project?
I think that because it's meant for anyone on the street with the car passing through. I can't really tell what the impact was. I'm hoping that people read it and go, what? I actually ordered it from a traffic sign company. So it's really, you couldn't tell unless you read it. And if you read it, you go, what? So I'm hoping for that what, and maybe later comes back to you. I'm thinking also to create a small program where it connects directly to the John Hopkins database, and actually changes the number online. Already started a little programming with that. Anything to make people aware that this is a really, really dangerous virus, and we really need to work together to, yeah, I mean, it's not worth even talking about this in this group, but it's really shocking how many people are still walking around without masks and hanging out.
Well, look at Victoria. Let's go back to something I think that's perhaps interesting to explore a little bit.
Okay.
As someone who's delved into, somatic or body-mind awareness and practices, has the actual experience of practice directly informed or impacted your work or your cognizance of the world, events, your own self-healing, things like that, your intuition? What's the sort of, if there is a correlation of engagement beyond the obvious superficial mundane engagement that practice may in some way inform?
Absolutely. I mean, how could it not, right? Because once you're starting to practice mindfulness and different techniques of understanding the quality of your life and your being and your purpose, intent, etc., it immediately starts being about how you're interacting and what you want to put out there and what effect you're having on others. And this is sometimes very obvious, like in the work with the Tibetan monks when we did the Nano mandala. That was very direct reference and work with chakra samvara and these ideas of, the sand mandala and nanotech and the invisible, the inaudible. And other times it's more subtle, and then in case like of this traffic sign, it's very obvious. I think it's really, there's no way that it couldn't inform the way you interact with others and how you try to engage people. And in fact, now I have to say my work has become direct about it. So the most recent
What does that mean?
projects,
Yeah.
it means that I actually am starting to create meditations online with the work that I'm doing. That works that were large installations, interactive, physical, VR, tactile, I'm now transferring to online and working with audio and binaural audio and augmented reality and kind of expanding this experience so that it's not so flat and that we can engage together in a different way of understanding meditation and meditation practice. So the first piece I did, this kind of experimentation actually, is the alien stardust work that premiered at the Museum of Natural History in Vienna on March 10th. On March 11th, the whole city closed down. On March 12th, I was on the plane back because the flights were canceled. And so all this work suddenly just got slammed shut. And I was really interested in having people think about the dust that is everywhere around us, meaning not only pollution dust, but stardust, because there's about 100 tons of stardust coming from other solar systems every day on Earth. So on your keyboard, there could be one particle that comes from another solar system every day. And
You mean an actual material particle of star,
yes,
physical,
yes,
tactile dust?
yes. The chance of one falling on your head or computer or in your kitchen is one a day easily. Could be from not only our solar system but beyond. And that to me was just amazing. But when you're
Victoria,
searching,
is that like ash?
ash is big.
No, I
Ash
mean,
is,
it is like a particle of matter that's been burned. Is that what the dust is?
it comes from the meteorite that crashes, whether in the sky or on, and then just disperses. Yes, yeah. So and then there's a whole world of micrometeorite hunters, which opened up to me. That was amazing. I hunted for micrometeorites on the roof of the Natural History Museum and we didn't find any stardust, but we found all kinds of pollution. And that became super interesting to me because it's invisible pollution that comes from all over. So there's no borders. In other words, on the rooftop of Vienna, we found Saharan dust. We found microplastics. We found ash from God knows where. And that was in a very quick search and looking through the microscope and finding it. So then I started thinking, well, how could this be a meditation? Because the work does evolve in a type of a meditation. And working with a group of people who have had a long working relationship, Paul Gelusa at Harvest Works, and a couple of students, Ivana and Clinton, and then Brianna joined us, and we just started doing this networked composition meditation that audiences would participate in, and started to experiment with sound on your headphones where it's binaural, so it moves through you, and it really actually worked. It was surprising to me. So the next time I had a show.
Wait a minute. What does works mean? How do you what is it that's happening that works?
What's happening is the feedback from the people who were participating was the right kind of questions. So that it worked. The right kind of, wow, I had no idea that stardust is all around us all the time. I'm allergic to dust, and I had no idea that there's thousands of types of dust, and that most of the dust in my house is actually skin dust, dust from my own skin. And just the fact that people came together at the same time to participate in this listening and watching and breaking from the usual way of thinking, so that we literally we are kind of out of our bodies in these boxes, that we literally got out of our bodies through the images and the sounds. That's what worked. It really worked. And now we're planning another one from the Integratron, which of course is a place that, for those of you who don't know, is in the Mojave Desert. That was built by kind of a mad scientist in the 50s who got his information from the UFOs, was informed that Nikola Tesla, and created this like incredibly perfect acoustic tabernacle where, you know, you could really, they have sound baths there, and one of the pieces that evolved as a kind of interactive piece there in 2008 was premiered there. So it's a real experiment evolving for me to think about how to use this kind of way of meeting with other minds, and creating experiences.
Victoria, you started getting involved with Tesla around the time that you met your future husband. Is that right?
Earlier, my father, when we were in New York, was obsessed with making him know who Nikola Tesla was. At that point, he was not known in America. It was Edison, that's it. And so he went on this big campaign to build a monument for him at the Niagara Falls. And in that process, he was dragging me around to meet his relative to the hotel where he passed away, went to Niagara Falls. We went to all these different places. And that's another example of how environments and events can influence you as a young child, and you don't even realize it's influencing you. And that could be for better or for worse, obviously. But I was absorbing a lot of that. And then later, yes, through that connection, I met my ex-husband, who was a nuclear physicist.
Yeah, so I don't think everyone is familiar with who Nikola Tesla was, but one of the things that Tesla did that's most perhaps in pop culture or in our culture, sort of obviously, is his work at the Niagara Falls, energy capturing from the falls, right, Victoria?
Yes, one of them.
But among other amazing things he's done, tell us a little bit about what I mean, that's working with water, by the way, which is
that's working with water, exactly. But it's really all the wireless technologies that we have, that is what he came up with. So we really owe it to Nikola Tesla to think about the wireless technologies. He was also working a lot with frequencies, and figuring out ways that you could, with frequencies, create these invisible borders. He was thinking in planetary ways before any of us were thinking that way, meaning in humans. And unfortunately, he passed away in a pretty bad state, you know, on first in New York. He went through some heights and then crashed, and you know, I also, in my research about him, discovered that he very much practiced and was learning a lot about Eastern spiritual practices. He was sure that he's receiving information from alien worlds, from other worlds off our planet, and talking about this. And because of him bringing this up, a lot of people thought he was mad, and in a way he was a mad genius. But
hey, Victoria, can we go back into a question about what your own sort of introspective practices or disciplines, and when you realized that was the thing to do for you? Was it when was that? for example?
Well, because I was raised by a devout socialist slash communist, we never were taught religion. And I'm actually very grateful for not having to be programmed in one form of religion or other. But I had an innate need for something. And I think I was 13 or something when I ran into a book that was uh, about meditation. And then I discovered, oh, yes. So my first boyfriend,
That's the late 60s or something?
no, um, yeah, I guess. Yes. But I think where it really turned for me is with my first boyfriend who was in Belgrade translating actively the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. And he played the sitar, and I was immersed in this kind of knowledge without knowing exactly what it is, but really learning, and then learning about Tibetan Book of the Dead. Then when I came back to New York, I discovered Alice Bailey and the connection of theosophists with Tibetan Buddhism, and that became super interesting to me. So in fact, there's one book that really had a strong influence on me, and that's The Consciousness of the Atom by Alice Bailey. That just really blew my mind when I read that book. I'll show you.
What was going on in the art world that might have in some way resonated or, supported at that time?
Well, in Belgrade, there was a very strong conceptual art movement. So I saw performances at the Student Cultural Center there with Marina Abramovitz. I heard of Joseph Beuys. I heard of this kind of amazing stuff going on. And then when I came back to New York, I was at the New York Public Library that was across the street from the MoMA. And I saw that Carolee Schneemann was giving a talk. And that was quite influential. And we became friends, actually. I did some videos for her. She became a sort of a mentor. So she was very much influential in Belgrade. Biljana Tomic, who is a curator and a author, was very much a mentor.
So there's a lot going on sort of in society and in the art community that is sort of somehow this universal in a way direction into spiritual aspects or these more subtle kinds of perceptual experiences and self.
Well,
because you begin to work with the self and with identity.
Yeah, I have to say that I rejected the art world for a long time. I really felt it was elitist, and it just, I was much more interested in the music scene and in the performance art outside of the art world scene, and maybe that actually ended up shifting me to where I ended up going, because I very early on, I was very fortunate. Right out of grad school, I was invited to Venice Biennale. There was this aperto section, and I had paintings and a sculpture piece in there. It was in the aperto, which is kind of outside of national pavilions. It's more for like upcoming young artists. Next to me was Brian Eno, who had these light boxes, and that kind of blew me away. And we talked, and I was like, wow, there's such a thing. And then his teacher came, and that happened to be Roy Ascott. Roy Ascott was showing on the other side somewhere. And he said, oh, you want to see what I'm doing? And I was like, yeah, whatever. And so he took me, and I saw something that I just couldn't process, because he was actually working with computers and working with networks and creating tapestries with poetry on computers, 1986. And the topic of that Biennale was art and science. So there was a lot about science and ephemeral and identity, and really way ahead of its time. And I could see my path. I could go into, painting, gallery, da da da, or I could go into this exciting unknown, like, and I'm going there. I'm totally going there. And as life would have it, 6 or 7 years later, I ended up being Roy's student in the PhD program, PhD for artists. So these things, just there's a kind of a network there that you're presented with a choice of how you want your expression to act upon others, and if you want to be on a path that is predetermined and safe, or if you want to, jump into the unknown and see where it takes you, surrender.
Well, jumping into the unknown demands a certain kind of confidence or choicelessness, and also some kind of support or nurturing or nourishing from a practice or a community and so on. But from time to time, we're just on our own, freewheeling, where perhaps there is no real self-image or identity. There's just being and doing. Was there an area or somewhere between the science investigation and your meditation, contemplative practices and exercises and so on, where your own identity became something that was more flexible, or something unknown, or something other than, as you described, the outer world, something predictable, something, a conceptual structure that fell apart?
Yeah, if I share the screen here again, this was the moment. So I ended up going to Egypt with my ex-husband, who's passed away since, and the project was documentary that I was shooting about looking for hidden chambers and pyramids of Egypt. And so this was where my kind of identity into the science began. It was called Unfolding the Pyramids Using Modern Physics. And so that was 1988, 1987. This was 4 years ago. So they did not find anything using cosmic rays. 4 years ago, they did. So here you see the Japanese crew that's actually finding hidden chambers using cosmic rays. So they were bombarding the pyramids with the cosmic rays. And they ended up finding the chambers. Now, why am I telling you this? Because I was absolutely floored that the way the science community was talking about this, it was so abstracted and difficult to understand, and just removed from the wonders, the amazement. Just like, I'm thinking, wow, you're telling me there's 100 tons of stardust falling on us every day? I feel the same way about the cosmic rays. you're telling me these cosmic rays are hitting us all the time? Like, why aren't we knowing this? And how is it that they can pass through physical objects as, you know, as thick as the pyramids of Egypt, right? Like, how? So to me, that became like, I have to do something to bring in the magic back into this kind of discussion, because what these guys are doing is amazing, and they're quite eccentric like artists, but somehow separate in their language, and the artists are separate in their language. So to find yourself in between is a kind of a sweet spot. And that's when you say the identity, that's where I found myself, where I thought I love being in that place where it's kind of a non place in a way, where they don't know what to think of you in either place. Like, what are you doing here? Yeah.
Uh,
But eventually, you know, after years, people go, oh, well, maybe art and science is something interesting, and now it's a hip thing, so it's all good.
so at some point in this life of yours, you know, you had two children, and I wonder how that impacted
Mhm.
your identity and your sort of tactile experience of the world, your interconnectivity with the world. Did this in some way wake you up to another aspect of interconnection or sensitivity?
Yes, absolutely. Every time I see my daughters, they're 30 now, um, 30 and 32. I just can't believe they came out of my body. I'm like, I just like, I'm amazed. How is this possible? These are grown people. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
I just,
Fortunately, they didn't come out grown. That's
but still, you know,
yeah.
why are people going around every day thinking this is normal? It's amazing. And yeah, it's quite a journey having children. Sometimes I'm jealous of my friends who didn't. um, it certainly complicates life, and creates a lot of empathy. Uh, I view my students in a different ways, you know, because of having children. And yes, actually, it's a very, very important experience, and it continues. It never ends, it seems like.
So you're a social sculptor, a cultural activist, for example, and how do you feel that art production can or does shape the world that we eventually live in, or can it?
I think I can. It really, you know, then you hit on the question of what is art, right? And what does that mean? And who is an artist, and who takes on that role, and the mantle, and, you know, what's the intent, and all of that. And I think diversity of expressions is important, and filtering the noise, I think, is now really important. And artists are quite good at taking the media and crazy filtering and filter to something that can be a different type of experience. And to shift people's perspective, I think, is probably the key of what a good artist would do. You know, that something that's a mundane thing suddenly becomes really interesting, so to shift the way people think. And now there's so much noise, it is insane. um, it becomes a real challenge to have some kind of filter, or space, or something where people can just experience themselves in a different way, and not get bombarded with confusion and, you know, lots of toxic stuff. So
I wonder what you think, Victoria, about, and by the way, I don't know if people are familiar with the fact that you are a professor teaching regularly, frequently, yeah, during the week.
yeah.
Gee, I
Well,
lost
I
my
should
train of
say
thought.
that
But
well, I'll tell you, one of the reasons I'm teaching is because I had kids. So I was, if you met me in New York in the 80s even, I would have told you, I'll never be a single mother. I'll never live in California. Who would want to live there, right? Especially not LA. And I'll never teach for a living because that's not what real artists do. And all of it came true. So be careful saying
careful.
what you'll
Yeah.
never do. But basically, as a single mother, I really needed something more stable. And I was very, very lucky to be interested in computers. And the art department at UC Santa Barbara, Richard Ross was chair then, we're looking for an artist who uses computers because the engineers were just, turning the artists off. And somebody said, well, there's this woman and she's an artist and she does computers. So I ended up setting up a whole art and media arts and connecting to engineering. And I immediately went over to the sciences. I just thought it was so much more interesting. Um, Check out the physics department, the engineering, and I loved it. I still do. I feel like a kid in a candy store. There's always some other amazing people to meet and some labs to nose into and find out what's going on in atmospheric sciences, or why don't I just go off to geology and check out this person, and hey, wait, there's a really good person working with CRISPR gene editing. Let's check them out. And so I ended up really loving it, and slowly understanding that it's a huge responsibility, and that being a teacher is a real honor that was actually bestowed onto me, and how much teachers in my life made a difference and how many destroyed a lot of uh, aspirations that I had, especially in the math and science area. I had the worst math and science teachers. It was horrible. Um, and that's true for all the scientists I meet. They had the worst art teachers who told them they weren't talented or they couldn't draw. So teachers are really important. And I started getting more and more into understanding that it's an important thing that a lot of people don't take seriously and just do it, in an offhand way, or take their PowerPoints out and go through the motions.
Victoria, I have this idea and I wonder what you think of it. I'm not sure if it's a new idea or it's just another way of saying something that many of us are familiar with. But when you talk about art as having the capacity or maybe the purpose of helping us to feel ourselves more, be ourselves more, wake up a little bit more, independently of what's going on around us, and the hyperbole of everyday life now, and the sort of blossoming of the society of the spectacle. That I have this idea that I was teaching meditation a few years ago, and this is how it came out. That when we do mantra, or chanting, or whatever practice it is, doesn't matter, that we're sort of traumatizing in a very subtle and gentle way our normal habits, our patterns. They're being stunned or put on hold somehow. And I came to this idea that it's like a sublime trauma. Like, I'm going to do this where, you ring the bell. and it's interventive, it's disruptive, it cuts through the patterns and takes us into this other space that may be a non-conceptual but very vivid and dynamic kind of awareness, a dynamic awareness that maybe we call, mindfulness, for example. But it's very dynamic. It's not just a sort of, a default awareness, kind of awareness. And it's that art, art does that. Art, Joseph Beuys. You spoke about Joseph Beuys. Babette is here, direct student of Joseph Beuys and a dear friend of Beuys, who I love very much. And there's Babette. And, that Beuys also used that shock to help us remain in a way, whatever it is, if it's angry or confused, but disrupted. Our familiarity, our worldviews, the art and the practices can be these sort of placeholders where we work these issues out. And the pandemic perhaps is also a great liberator, a common denominator from some people to have this experience of reorienting themselves and coming out, on our own feet. And so the tuning fork that Emily and I created is meant to kind of hold that space, be that kind of disruption and a gathering, a networking space. And I know you're doing this kind of work very aggressively with your activities, teaching and performing and art and culture production. It's not just art production, it's culture production. So I wonder what you think about these ideas. And we have about 30 minutes left, by the way, where we also engage our friends here to make comments or ask questions. This is just a kind of research, laboratory in a way. The butterfly effect. Oh, there you go.
So to respond to that, what you see here is the iridescent blue, but actually there's no pigment. It's really the patterns of the cellular patterns that make our eyes see blue. And so we know about the butterfly effect and the question of Lorenz. But here's a thing or two to mention about this project.
Thank you, Victoria. This is such a magnificent example, and thank you.
Sure. So I'll run through it very quickly. So this is an MRI of the chrysalis, and you can see, and chrysalis has 8 pumps that are constantly
Is that
moving.
chrysalis is a larva? Is it?
Yes. Yeah, the chrysalis of the butterfly. And just let me go back for a second
So
here.
exciting.
So James Jimjevsky, my partner who's listening in, and maybe will chime in during question and answer, he does research in nanotech, and he really participates and collaborates in the works we do, and I've learned a lot from him, vice versa. He did he looked at yeast vibrations and output them as sound. So we actually could hear cellular vibration sounds. This was very exciting.
The sound, let's just be clear. The sound of the cells of the butterfly in the larvae state.
So initially, he started researching the sounds of yeast cells, and that led to a phone call from a woman who asked, did you ever measure the sounds of metamorphosis from a chrysalis to a butterfly? And of course not. But the thing about this piece is that it wasn't necessarily his interest in research, and it wasn't necessarily something that I came up with. It's something that came to us. So we started looking out of curiosity. And this would be the MRI, but this is the analysis of the metamorphosis over the period of 2 weeks. And this is a better image that you can see.
Victoria, the metamorphosis of the chrysalis to become a
into
butterfly. To become a butterfly.
Yes. So how it's
not a
moving
metaphor.
from,
This is a real thing that you're looking
this
at.
is the real thing. This is the real thing. And it's being transferred, amplified, set up and amplified so we can hear it. Okay. So, but what was shocking and super interesting and exciting to us is that metamorphosis does not happen gradually. It actually happens in bursts, and these bursts are consistent. So when you talk about entrainment and shocking, it really is about that. And they sound like constant, right? So now, how do you bring this to an audience to really make them absorb this without making it scientific? Here are some of the images that were done with a scanning electron microscopy of the cells of the butterfly wings. And this is a close-up and another close-up. And you're talking about a magnified 10,000 times.
What are we looking at? What is that part of the
At a
butterfly?
cell, butterfly wing, a cell of the butterfly wing.
One cell.
One cell. And so this is the integratron that I mentioned earlier. This is where we premiered that piece. So what you're seeing here is this structure that's surrounded by a Tesla coil. And the idea was that the Tesla coil would speed turn around and create the vibration inside of it that would heal you.
So wait.
Wait. So this is where the piece premiered. I'll tell you, then we can go back. So we started connecting the idea of frequency and vibration place. And this place is in the Mojave Desert right next to this big rock. And this is the person that initially started this whole project with the integratron at the giant rock. He actually lived under the rock where he was receiving this information from the UFOs, how to create this structure, okay? So just to give you context, in the 50s, it was where the largest UFO conventions, 60s, the largest UFO conventions were going on, and it was set up and funded by Howard Hughes. And then Blue Morph. So we decided to actually create an artwork meditation piece in this structure in the integratron. And this is what happened. So what people did is they actually would stand on this interactive platform. There was a tall meteorological balloon on their heads, and you would actually feel and hear the vibrations of metamorphosis. But what we didn't expect, which was phenomenal, and it kept going, is that people would perform their meditations. This is audiences. This is not us. So this piece, this is the platform that has the image of the cell engraved in it. And then you're seeing it in various iterations. So this one was in Italy. Here you are in Norway. You can see how tall this is. And then the others are watching. So people would take turns.
What is the experience, Victoria?
So basically, this is maybe the most spectacular piece. A version at the St. John the Divine Cathedral in Gdansk in Poland. What happens is a person comes, so it's kind of a quiet, I'll give you links to the videos so you can watch, but it has this ambient sound. By the way, it's sound of actual metamorphosis, so it's not our
This
interpretation.
sound produced by butterflies as they're emerging
Yes.
from the cocoon, from the
Yeah.
chrysalis.
And you're actually feeling this organically, but because of the vibration and the knowledge that it's about the metamorphosis, you're basically meditating on the idea of change and metamorphosis. And this was happening exactly when the economy was crashing, 2008, where the financial markets kind of looked the same way, like the butterfly exchange was just up and down, up and down, up and down. And so here, what was amazing about this particular one is that the cathedral had lighting for another event. And I asked them to connect it. So when one person sits down, the lights go on, the visuals of the microscopic images go on. You never see a butterfly, you just see abstractions of it. And you then are generating this light and the sound and the vibration, but you're also feeling it. And here's different people going through it. This was in New York at the Governor's Island.
Okay.
Kids get into it too.
So you're going to complete a kind of theory about this now, right? Or some sort of a thesis here.
Yes, actually, what that piece really got me thinking is how to very deliberately create work that the audience owns, that the audience becomes the performer. And even if one person stands and performs it and the others watch, it's still kind of it's for whoever's there, whoever showed up, then becomes the center of it. And or there's a kind of a ritual quality to it that I'm interested in also, and some kind of way of some steps that you follow.
So I have one more question, and that is that work, for example, and perhaps your work, more current work. How is this disruptive or interventive or subversive in some way as a means of re-envisioning society, reshaping how we see ourselves and ourselves in society? How does the work address those kind of issues, if you feel it does?
I don't know that it does, but I certainly try to attempt to have people, especially now, I think it's important to, like when I work with the planktons produce 80% of the air we breathe. And so a lot of people don't know this, right?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
So
News to
first
me.
of all, for people to know this is a big deal. Number one, I think already I'm doing my work. Just, hey, you know what? It's planktons. It's not forests. It's planktons. And then when you create these environments where, in addition to learning this fact that a lot of us don't know, that the bottom of our food chain is in danger, that then all of us are in danger, we could lose air. Whether you're left or right or MAGA or whatever, it doesn't matter. We all have to breathe. And so to me, that becomes a way to start talking about some of these issues where it's about breath, and that we have a shared experience with the breath. And the alien stardust, the dust that travels everywhere. So number one, the pollution, you cannot put borders when you're talking about dust. It's just not possible, number one. But number two, if you're talking about stardust and start pulling people's heads into, hey, we're part of this larger, amazing cosmic system. Maybe when you come back, you start thinking differently about these issues and these arguments and that are so destructive and polarizing right now.
Okay, Victoria, it's clear to Emily and I that this is just a sort of like what do we call it? A kind of what do you call that when you have a curriculum or a syllabus? This kind of like a syllabus description of a much more extensive conversation with you, and perhaps the opportunity for others here to engage with you. But just for now, why don't we let others engage tonight and this afternoon with you over there? And we thank you for your really great generosity and flexibility and empathy in your being with us today, and your patience with me. Your patience with me. So there must be some folks, Ron Daniels, for example, saying, hi, Ron.
Hello, Victoria. Hey, hi, John.
Hi.
I have a question about where you're talking about this atmospheric phenomena. I've been noticing lately that there's a lot more certain times of the day that the atmosphere produces a lot of ozone, enough that I can smell it in the air. Is that like a self-correcting mechanism of the Earth by producing the ozone to help purify some of the things that you're talking about?
Oof, I wouldn't know. I mean,
no,
I don't think so. Yeah, Jim, maybe you could chime in.
Okay, there's two types of ozone. There's ozone in the upper atmosphere. It protects us from dangerous ultraviolet rays, and then there's ground-based ozone. And ground-based ozone requires things like car exhaust, nitrous NOx, basically. It also requires sunlight, and there's a catalytic reaction, photocatalytic reaction that produces ozone. So if it's a sunny day and there's lots of car fumes, like in LA, then you get an excess of ozone. And it has no positive effect on anyone's health. It's quite the opposite. That's me.
Jim, may I ask you a question in terms of what Ron refers to? When we go near a waterfall or turn on that, ozone production machine that we bought in the 70s and 80s, what kind of ozone is it that we're smelling? What is that?
You're smelling, basically, it's oxygen is O2. It's a diatomic molecule, okay? Normal oxygen, air you breathe, is O2. And ozone is actually 3 oxygen atoms bound together to form O3. And it's very bad for you. There's no positive effect at all. So if you think the smell at the seaside is not actually ozone, it's based on iodine. It smells like ozone, or ozone smells like the seaside. The best thing to do with ozone is keep away from it.
I should also mention
it's a bit like radium. They were selling radium chocolate before. It was supposed to give you energy. It's actually killing you. Well, so ozone is the same.
What is Ron experiencing? What's happening in his area in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan? Why is that happening?
I smell ozone in the evenings. I'll crack my window open in my bedroom and I'll smell ozone.
So
it's not ozone. Ozone production stops when it gets dark. It requires sunlight. So what you're smelling is something else that you're associating with the smell.
I have an ozone generator and it smells just exactly the same.
Well, what I heard recently,
you.
Jim, what I heard recently from the atmospheric sciences is that even though there's less pollution from less flights, the ozone hole is bigger than in a long time. And they're suspecting that it's all the alcohol from the PPP, from everybody just constantly using alcohol for many different reasons. And that may be actually influencing the ozone hole. But the ozone hole apparently has really grown since the pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why would it have grown since the pandemic?
Well, they don't know, but they think that it may be from everybody using all the antiseptics and alcohols.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comment or question? I know, by the way, Jim Merriweather, you're looking at us, but we're looking at you from a different angle, by the way, just a note.
There has to be a mechanism that the earth has for correcting. I mean, the rain is peroxide also, correct? So, I mean, if there wasn't some sort of a mechanism that the earth could do to counteract some of the things that you're talking about, Victoria, wouldn't we all have already expired from pollution and invading dust, things like that?
Yeah, well, it's given the amount of the number of species that are disappearing and the corals that are dying, we are in danger. Definitely, it's not a good spot for us right now with climate disruption.
But you admit the earth will, I mean, if we weren't here as humans, then it would shut us off and the earth would correct itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So
I mean, we're being tested right now.
yeah.
You know, this is our chance, and I don't know how many red flags have to go up. But one of the moments that was really amazing to me and that made me feel like, wow, we really should be doing something as artists more than we are, and more of us, I should say, was in Paris when a woman who was a scientist representing French scientific EU, etc., gave a speech, and it was dealing with artists in residence. And she said, imagine behind me 1,000 scientists with all the data, and we present papers and papers and papers to the EU and to everybody who's in charge of the world infrastructure, and nothing happens. And she said, we're desperate because we keep saying, unless we do something, this is just going to get worse and worse and worse. So maybe artists can help us. I just thought, oh my God, let's try. They've been saying this since the 70s, you know, that we're going the wrong direction.
I have a question, John.
Hey, Jimmy. By the way, Babette, there's Jim Merriweather.
Hi, Babette.
We were all in Nepal together a few years ago, Victoria,
Nice.
filming the body of
Nice.
Durjan Rinpoche, whose body had shrunken after his death.
Wow.
There you go, Jim.
Wow.
So I'm wondering, Victoria, the sound that you were recording, is it actual auditory sound, or is it some other phenomena that's being translated into sound? And
Yes.
Yes, which? It's the latter?
Yes, so it's the latter. It's vibrations that are amplified and sped up so that we can hear it. So our sound field is very narrow. There's a lot of frequencies that dogs can hear, for instance, and we can't. So the vibrations of the cells, also the yeast cells that Jim was working with, they usually in sciences show graphs because we can't hear it, but even the graphs are translations of the vibrations.
So when you
And
say
the
when you say vibrations of the
the
larva,
movement, yeah,
yeah. So it's actually it is auditory. Then you're suggesting, but just auditory outside of the range that we can normally hear, and you're translating it somehow into the range of human auditory spectrum. Is that correct?
exactly. Just like the graph is being translated into a visual.
Yeah.
It's obviously not visual, but it's being translated so we can understand what's going on.
And so what is the period of time if you observing this metamorphosis from what stage do you take it to what stage do you take it? Do you take it from when it's still a larva to when it's actually a butterfly?
When
Or
it's emerging. So
just when
from
it's
the point,
emerging?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
how,
Then it's about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
So
And the way they did it, and it was in Jim's lab, so he can also chime in. So you have the chrysalis with a kind of a micro mirror, and then a laser beam that's shot onto the micro mirror. So as the mirror moves, the laser beam is recording it.
Hold on a minute.
so
Hold
it's
on.
actually it's
Jimmy.
it's a movement.
It's
So
a
Jimmy,
movement.
Pulsing.
Victoria,
it's
It's a
the-
mechanical motion of the larvae,
Uh-huh.
or and the micromirror, when you shine a laser on it, the beam is deflected and it amplifies the motion. And we pick that up with a thing called a position sensitive silicon detector. And so we have a low frequency. It's like sort of in the hertz range. And then I gave it to Victoria, and she speeded it up so that it would be audible. So the graphs you see are just of the mechanical motion, and we all know sound is mechanical motion, like the motion of a guitar string or whatever.
Right.
So Jim Jazowski, you put a mirror on the larva. You actually put a mirror on it. You shoot a laser beam onto that mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So as that light is striking the mirror, the movement of the larva is generating those vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
It's measurable.
Yeah, it's deflecting the sound. Yeah. I can measure very small things, so it's quite a big motion. Like there's about 1,000th of a meter. I mean, a millionth of a meter, but I'm used to measuring a billionth of a meter, so it's no big deal. It's easy. You could do it.
Yeah, I'll be doing it tonight, as a matter of fact, in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Wait, Marriott has a question.
Thanks. This is just a fascinating conversation. Thank you, Victoria, so much.
Thank you for saying that.
I went to this panel. This conversation reminds me of a panel I went to at the Met several years ago. Maybe John and Emily were there. It was called The Dating Game, and there was a panel of scientists and artists. And it was just a beautiful, platform for cultural activism. And another person that understands this concept of artists being able to be in front of evolution and like stir things up and change the world is James Hansen, the climate scientist. He said, like a lot of scientists understand that they have the knowledge and the data, but they need somebody to translate that to the consciousness of the public. So that's what you're doing. I had a question about the atmospheric science, and I'm wondering if you've done anything with geoengineering, chemtrails.
Not directly, but once you start looking into dust and atmosphere, you cannot not pass through the chemtrails and think about that too. I tried to what I did just very briefly is take a meteorite from the Natural Museum collection, one from each continent, and then think about when the meteorite falls in Chelyabinsk in Russia or in Morocco or these places, how that dust propagates, and then what other dusts are there, right? And how that moves and shifts. And then if you think about it, bacteria and viruses travel with dust. So this whole idea of borders became really important as a big part of the message, that when you're talking about the virus now, what we're dealing with, you are talking about dust and bacteria traveling through winds. And so these ideas of locking down a country that's doing great, and we were not even traveling. I feel like you don't have to travel. You can stay there. The dust is going to move everything around. And until we start working as a planet, we're not going to solve this problem. We maybe temporarily, maybe for a short while. But the big message of this virus that's now truly a pandemic that we're conscious of, in other words, the whole world is conscious of it, the whole world's wearing masks or not, is that we have to start working as a planet. And until that starts getting into our habit brains that need retraining, like what John's talking about, we're just going to keep locking, unlocking, locking, unlocking, bordering, unbordering. It's not going to work. When you take the virus and you add to that climate change and then ridiculous politics, it's really we got to do what we can do to raise awareness, is all we can do. But that's basically, chemtrails are the same thing. They pass and then it just keeps going.
And the 5G rollout is also a big issue. I think that we're distracted so much by the virus. We're not looking at what's happening with 5G. And it's the same idea as, you're measuring this, metamorphosis and the vibrations that occur and giving people an experience. Like, what if we could experience the electromagnetic energy waves, the wavelengths that are actually bombarding our bodies as we speak, from our phones, from the towers, from the new technologies.
Yep, the frequencies. So
Yeah.
really, to make visible the invisible and audible the inaudible is the key, really, so that people can understand. Actually, Jim smokes cigarettes, and at one point he told me, it's like the virus would be just like this, like the smoke, and it just goes, and maybe you don't see it, but it's there. And I thought, wow, I mean, we really need that, more of that kind of visual.
Thank you.
Sorry, John, you were going to say
No, not at all. We're getting warmed up to say goodnight. But one burning question I have, apart from all the cultural activism that we do and that we imply, and the scholarship we try to bring to it, but here's a question I just, when I was leading a retreat a few months ago, I think almost a year ago, I had discovered a scientific, I believe it was a scientific paper, maybe Jim can verify that, or Victoria, that mentioned that, and actually I think Monet was at this conversation, excuse me, that all matter has a measurable experiential component. That matter, no matter what the matter is, has a measurable experience. And that experience is considered in science as a consciousness. So that the experience that matter has inherently is consciousness. And I don't mean this to be an abstract topic or a point, but it's a very practical point. I wonder if one of you in the science world can convey this in some way that has some practical application.
Well, the problem there is that science has to prove what you're saying, and with the methods available, you cannot, or it's very difficult to prove what you're saying, what has been knowledge in many ancient cultures and societies for a very long time. So,
Victoria, I don't think it implies that the consciousness that we commonly understand as consciousness is the same consciousness that is being explored, but rather that let's just say that the body, our physical body, has physical intelligence. It's not a conceptual intelligence, it's not an intellectual intelligence, it's a physical intelligence that we can work with as experiential information and material. So if matter has consciousness, we can alter that consciousness by altering the experience of the matter. And that's where we get into transformation and liberation and the rainbow body and all these sorts of more subtle realities that are not philosophic, they're real. That's what I want to talk about. But maybe we don't have time.
you're talking about embodied consciousness, embodied intelligence. And when I was doing the project with the octopus brainstorming, the octopus is a perfect example of this kind of biological mandala. It's got 8 kind of fingers into the world, and it thinks with and moves with the whole body. It's got eyes that are very similar to ours, and it's an intelligence that shows us that the whole body is thinking or moving or conscious. And to understand that is so critical, because it's certainly not only in the brain when you're talking about consciousness. And it's certainly not even in the individual, it's collective, and it's intertwined with not only other humans, but other beings and creatures and plants, and the whole complexity of these crows that are passing by. They're agreeing with me.
Well,
Can I say something?
Oh, there you are. Thank God, Babette.
Just like to ask something. And first of all, thank Victoria, of course, for a really amazing evening and sharing your work. Thank you so much. John, I was actually, or I want to question this to Victoria. What John was actually saying, I was thinking the opposite. And I believe that what you're referring to in the collective consciousness, Victoria, has already to do with what David Bohm was talking about in, his theory of oneness. And isn't it so that in the scientific development of neoplasticity actually tells us that we don't need matter to have consciousness? Correct me, Victoria, if I'm wrong, but I was wanting to go about John's question from the other side, like from the other point of view, that this is what is, I think, amazing, that consciousness doesn't need matter. And so that consciousness itself can bring about transformation. What I would like to ask from Victoria in that sense is, are you optimistic about our future? Where are we going? I mean, studying and researching what you are studying, are you optimistic? about, I happen to stay very optimistic about life and about the fact that so many people are already transforming and into consciousness, etc., etc. And we are living the warm sculpture that Boyce was talking about. We are not just thinking of technological progress for its own sake. We are thinking and using technological process and progress and scientific research like you're doing. We are doing it for healing purposes of our humankind and for the planet. So I like to ask you, are you optimistic? Where are we going?
I'm a hopeless optimist. I'm a hopeless optimist. I really believe that even this destruction is because something new is coming up, and it's really about that. And I choose to be optimistic. So, I mean, there's many different ways we can go, right? So the way I imagine it is a kind of a quantum world where all different possibilities are out there. And if we just keep thinking about the negative, we're gonna go there, right?
Yeah.
So it's really a kind of a collective magnet. So the more of us that wake up, the more of us that connect, and even having these Zoom meetings, more of that happens internationally. Now we can meet this way that would be very expensive, very difficult, logistically complicated. We can do this. There's, of course, there's downsides to it, but it's so important. And I just, like I say, I choose to be optimistic. It's a daily job to get myself back into that place. I have to say,
Thank you.
it's a struggle. And it's an even bigger struggle to talk to my students or even friends and my daughters and just try to pull them up, because it's so heavy. It's so intense what's going on now. It is just epic, and it's really, really difficult. So it's really become my practice to just keep going. I refuse to be pulled down. There's gotta be the light at the end of this tunnel, and we're just keep going. And that's really what I'm trying to do with these meditations online that are artworks. Just really pull people into experiences that are not necessarily even all just, oh, it's all lovely, but more about, yes, everything is falling apart around us, but you have that center, that peace in you, regardless, and just keep going into that. So I'm very happy that you are also an optimist.
Thank you for tonight. Thank you, John, Emily. Thank you all for being all
Thank
together.
you, and so lovely to see Kathy and to know that Linda is here, my two favorite people. Lovely.
The wonderful family that we are.
Yeah.
And it's vast and it's interconnected.
And it's vast.
Yeah.
I hope you join me for the winter solstice at the Integratron. John, maybe you can share it with your list.
I certainly will.
I think it will be really, really beautiful.
The article that I was referring to, Babette, actually quoted David Bohm, and it was about oneness. The article about this consciousness and matter, so beautiful. So I'll send that to you. Very sadly, and the good news that we're sad is we got to say goodbye. And yeah, and Victoria, I was noticing as well that you are evidently optimistic.
Nice group of kindred spirits.
One thing that I noticed,
I work on it.
a few years ago, I noticed that the glass is not half empty. It's not half full. It's both. So good night, and thank you all.
Good night, and thank you very much.
Wherever
and thank
you are
for
in the world.
Beautiful comments, Sally. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Victoria.
Bye, bye, Alex.
See you again.
Bye,
Thank you.
Kathy.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Good night, Facebook and YouTube Live.
Bye.